Hello, my name is Eric. I'm a software engineer, and this is another entry in my Code With Me video series, working once again on the Kanban task tracker. I'll link above to a playlist that contains all of the Kanban videos recorded so far. Some of them are just code reviews, others are code with me. So here we go. I believe this time around I'm going to work on the ability to edit a task, which right now we don't have. We can delete a task with a nice little pop-up. Which works fine, but I want to be able to edit a task. So in the previous video, we broke out some functionality where we just made some custom hooks, but I'd like to take another look here. So we've got our task modal in our create edit folder. That's this bit of code right here, which is primarily just rendering the pop-up. And then we now have our functionality of this in a hooks folder with the useMakeTask code here. And the thing I'm considering is, maybe this isn't best practice, maybe this is okay, trying to consider the single responsibility principle. If this component is responsible for making a new task and editing a task, it technically might not be single responsibility then, right? That's two things that it's handling. But if I frame this in the way of managing the state of a task object, maybe that's appropriate then as a single responsibility. I'm also keeping in mind the dry methodology. Don't repeat yourself. So all of the stuff that's going on with these components here, it would just be repeated again if I'm going to make another component that handles just editing. I don't know. We'll mess with it. We'll see what it looks like for us. And if I change my mind, I change my mind. Let's see what happens. So close some of this other stuff. So I've got our task modal here. And I guess the first thing we should look at is when we go from the view task view card, there it is. I don't need this change event here anymore, so we'll get rid of that. So right now, we've got this edit button over here somewhere. Here's our edit button, which isn't doing anything. And our first step is going to be clicking that edit button to make our task modal appear. Right, so what do we have here already? We're going to do something similar to what this delete modal is doing, right? Where if we click on delete task, it renders that delete modal because we have a state for that, right? So let's start there and let's do a const. We'll do edit modal and set edit modal, and we'll put use state false to start that out. And nice and easy down here on the edit task button, we'll just throw an on click here and an anonymous function, and then we can just update the state of set edit modal, and we'll drop that to true. And right now it's not going to do anything but update our state because we don't have anything rendering here. But just like we have with the delete modal at the bottom, and let me drop this out of the way, we basically have a ternary operator here that just says if delete modal is a truthy value or true, to render this delete modal, we pass in a bunch of props here. So we'll do the same thing down here, and we'll say if edit modal is true, then let's render this, what do we call this? Task modal? Task modal. All right. So task modal is going to require a bunch of props, right? So we can see everything that's here. Show add task is missing, set show add task, column names, and add new task. So show add task and set show add task, those are just our visibility, right? So if I get rid of this for a second and make this pop back up, which now if we're going to use this for two different things, you know, the naming conventions here are a little off, right? Because if I click this button to add a new task, that's the show add task coming from, I believe, the app, the high level of the app, right? So add board, show add task, yeah. So the structure of our app here is we have our app, the high level, and then the nav bar, which is where that button lives to add a task to the board. So we're going to have its own show add task, quote unquote, exist at the task view card level. So that's what our edit modal is going to be. So rather than passing in show add task and set show add task, which is actually, let's go look at the task modal, because I don't think I'm doing anything with show add task besides setting it to a false value. And yeah, and I'm doing it here and here. And I don't know why I did this way, because I don't need to pass in the value of show add task. I can just make this false in both of these places. And I don't need show add task here. And I don't need show add task here, right? And I guess what I'll do is I'll go back to app and I'll remove that as well. Because right now that's going into the nav bar. Show add task, we don't need it. So don't need to pass that through. And then we can go to the nav bar component, which is in my nav bars, nav bar, show add task. I don't need, the only thing I need is the setter. And see, this is doing the same thing here, where we're setting it to the opposite of show add task, right? Which this case is just going to be a true value. This is the button up here that we're clicking on. Don't need it to go to the opposite of what it starts as. So we can get rid of show add task here. Just a little cleanup thing, right? Of things I don't really need in here that I decided to put in for some reason. And I guess that's it then, right? Show add task goes to true. Board list is giving me an issue for some reason. Okay. We said show add board is missing in type. Did I accidentally remove that for some reason? Doesn't look that way, does it? So let's save everything and see how things are working here. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. We still have prompts we need to pass in here that we didn't do yet. That's still working. Open this up. This is still working. So that looks fine. Cool. We'll come back and deal with that another time. And now let's work on our task modal, right? So we've got the requirements here now officially of set show add task, which in our case is not going to be show add task. It's going to be edit modal, right? Or set edit modal. So, which I should probably adjust that name then, right? So I don't confuse myself later. Because I think that has the potential to happen here. We go to Task Modal, and if we do, instead of set show add task, we do set show modal, right? Change this and anything else we've got to set show modal, and then we can go back to our app here and change this to set show modal for our, well, actually, you know what? We can, the nav bar, that's fine, but we need it to show up on board view. Board view. Set show add task. So we'll do, instead of this, so now be set show modal, right? So all that should work out, I think. So it looks like that's, oops. Yet again, need to comment this out to make sure all those adjustments are working. And we have to have this activated first. I gotta take care of that. Okay, so that's working fine. All this stuff seems to be working cool. So we know those adjustments were fine. So now we have set show modal required, column names required, add new task, which, what is add new task, right? Add new task, which is this, comes down from our app. Or a board view, actually. Let's see. Board view. Add new task, right? Which takes the task that we make in that modal, sends it back, calls out to our immer function list, and basically inserts this new task into whatever board we're adding this to, right? So when we go through this process of editing a task, I'm still going to do that in an immer function, and I'm not going to pass add the task back to here, right? This is going to be called upon from a different place, which is what's going to be a little bit confusing of the way I'm setting this up. So maybe this is a bad idea, but I think I'm going to roll forward with it anyway. So instead of this being add new task, we can call it return task, right? In this modal, like what this modal does is it handles the state of a task, whether that's making a task out of nothing or editing a task that exists, and then sends that task back to whatever called it so that it can be handled appropriately, right? So instead of add new task, we should call this return task, right? So the only other spot that we'll switch it up there, return task, and we'll adjust that. So now in board view, instead of this being add new task, we'll call this return task equals, in this case, the add new task function, right? So let's just make sure I didn't mess anything up. We'll, once again, go back here, comment this out, save all this stuff, and we'll give this a quick refresh even though it should be fine. Make sure we can add a task with whatever. I don't know why I'm even bothering typing anything. And that works fine, right? So we've got our test task here with our subtask that we can do all our adjustments with. So that works. All right, so now we've got a little bit better of a naming convention. If I'm rethinking this modal in a different way, that modifies a task object. So we've got set show modal, whatever's going to control to actually show that modal, column names, which we'll be passing in, and return task, right? So, which if we come back here, you know, same thing, I've got some functions in here that I haven't split out, but I'm going to leave that for now. Maybe we do that in the future. So edit modal, set edit modal. We're going to pass that in as our first set show modal. So set show modal equals set edit modal. So we've got that in there. And then we need column names, which we have column names here as well, right? Which is just being passed in from parent components, whatever columns we have in that board. So we can just make that nice and easy. Column names equals column names. And then the last thing we need now is our return task, which we don't have anything for yet, but we're going to call this, I don't know, we're going to make a function for this called edit task, I guess, right? Maybe. How are we working this in board view? Add new task. It's just a function where we call back that task, right? And we send that task over to Immer. So we're going to do the same kind of thing. Let's just copy what we've got here. And we'll go back to our task view card. And we will put this over here. Do this as edit task. We receive a new task. We're going to call in an unnamed Immer function. All right. Adjust to use a currently unnamed Immer function. And we'll say edit task instead of unnamed. Let's say, you know, currently non-existent Immer function. That's going to do the same kind of stuff. Not sure yet how all this is going to work out, but we know we're going to handle this the same kind of way. So now edit task exists and it's going to work the same kind of way. Cool. Let's save all. Nothing should freak out. Nothing should break. I'm wrong. What does it say is breaking here? Oh, I didn't finish my ternary operator. Basically, we're going to have this or null, right? That's that. Okay. No? Did I somehow? It looks like I messed up a bracket somewhere. And there we go. That happens sometimes. I don't really know where I messed that up. Maybe when I... Oh. Yeah, I see. When I copied this over, I didn't copy that bracket. So that makes a lot more sense. Okay. So this is what's going on. This all works still. Now if we open this and we click the edit button, we should have our pop-up, which is cool. And the issue we have now is that I'm not getting any data in here, right? We didn't set that part up yet. And again, this is the part where I'm struggling with this, where I'm, you know, I probably shouldn't be doing this the way I'm doing it. I probably should handle this separately, but I'm going to continue on and I'm going to make this work on both for the time being. And what we can do here is from the task view card, we've got a task object here, right? And this task object contains everything that exists here in this task. It's got our title, it's got, let's look for one that has a description. It's got our title, it's got our description, it's got our subtasks, it's got, everything in here. So we could just pass that over to our task modal, and we should be able to display that information, right? We would have to pass this over actually to the hook that we created. So this might get a little bit funky, but let's go look at that hook, right? Because again, like, this hook's not going to do anything different. Let's look at this make task hook. Let's put it over here. This hook isn't going to do anything different than the logic we've already set up. So there's no point in me doing this again, right? Like, instead of just only passing in column names here, if I also pass in the task, then instead of saying start with this title description and call names default of blank blank and call name 0, we can just say, like, if task exists, do it as task.title, do it as task.description, do it as task.status. So let's give that a shot, and let's see how this works out for us. So we're going to have to make this a prop here, right? When we're going to send in, task, which is of type tasks, and we'll need to bring that in as our props, whatever our task is, right? And once we have that, then instead of just sending this over to call names over here, we're going to have to send to our useMakeTask hook. We'll send over that task. All right, and right now over here, that's not accepting anything. You can see I'm getting an error. It's just saying it doesn't even expect it. It expects one argument but got two. So let's put in our task here, right, which is going to be of type tasks. I've got my type up top, so that's cool. And in this area now here, rather than just being title equals this, we can say title would be task dot title or blank, right? So in this effect, this is just going to say, like, if task.title exists at all, use it. Otherwise, use a blank title, right? So the only thing, of course, I'm missing now is actually sending a task in here, which this is the optional thing, right? I'm not always going to have a task in this because I'm calling this particular component in different ways. So if we use that plus button up top, that's not going to send a task over. If we use this plus button, that's not going to send a task over. So that's optional. This is where I'm kind of breaking that single responsibility principle, and I'm aware of that. I just feel like maybe it makes sense to do that here. I don't know. So I'm going to just go with it, and we're going to let it ride. So from the task view card, this now is where I'm going to be sending in. Let's expand this out again. Now we're going to send in the task, right? Task, which was optional, is the task that we have, right? And this should, go away. It's just a little bit of laggy for me. So let's save all. I think I've got that all worked out so far. So now what should happen for us is, let's click out of this. If I make a new task, I'm getting a blank there, which isn't great, right? So why is that happening? So that's erroring out, so we'll take another look there. Does it work for me if I go into the edit? Well, that's working. So it is importing the title, but it's not using the blank. And I guess is it because I haven't made that optional? Does that matter? This should be optional, right? See, maybe this is a bad idea. Still, see, now I'm okay, right? Now that it's optional, you know, it doesn't need to have that task in there, so it's giving me that blank description here. And if I load this from the edit, now I've got my title, right? That was in this build UI onboarding flow. So I can do the same thing with description and column names. And again, like, I'm struggling with the single responsibility principle here thing here, because it's just, if I'm thinking that this modal handles the state of a task object, then that's what it's doing, whether that's a new task object or an existing task object. So let's throw in the other stuff we've got here. We've got task with a question mark, right? Dot description for blank. And then we should also, task.status I think should work, right? Status or column names, which I don't actually, task.status isn't going to work immediately, I don't think. Let's see what's going on with, well, let's see. Let's look at one that's in doing. So we know the status is doing, and if I hit edit task, it still says to do. And what was our work here? How did we do this? So we have logic to update the task status, but I don't think we're actually using task status to display in the task modal, right? So what are we doing here on status select is just getting column names, right? So that's a problem too, because that component is only getting the column names. Where are we? Status select. This component is only getting the column names right now, but I also have this set up to receive a task, right? So we know we can pass task in here. This is, I already had this set up previously, which is great, because I do have, if we're sending in a task, use the status of the task, right? And make that the selected option. So we can, now from our task view card, also send in task into status select, which does exist there, and the edit card. We want task modal, right? Okay. So the task modal now with status select isn't using task. Let's have it use that task prop and send in the task, and that's fine. So now we can see this updated to doing. Let's close out and let's look at another one here. So this one's going to say to do if we click edit, which is fine. We know that. But this one in the doing column here, you know, this it's the same component, right? This current status component with the drop-down select is the same component as if I go into my edit modal. It's the same thing. Now it says doing, right, which is correct. That's what we wanted. It's using the task status, when before this didn't have it because I just made this as making a new task. Now it's handling editing a current task. So that was already set up. So we know it's going to either have task data or not. This was set up to receive task data. Now it's working the way we want it to work, right? And still, the logic that exists in this dropdown allows it to change whatever status is there. All that stuff's going to work. We're just building off of all the stuff that we had existed. We're not repeating any code. We're not duplicating any code. This is all working well. Don't have a description here. Let's find one that has, this one has a description, right? We know that. And edit, the description there shows as well. Subtasks we don't have yet, right? We're going to have to work on that. So let's make that work for us. We've got in our useMakeTask, we're sending in the task. We know within that task we have subtask information, right? So the same kind of thing we just did, where instead of starting this subtask array as a blank array, we should be able to make this like, I think this should work out the same way for us. If a task exists, task.subtasks, right, or a blank array. And now if we go back and we look at, this has 2 subtasks to it. If we go and we click on edit, and there we go, now our subtasks show up, right? So it's just changing the initial state of how this modal is managing state, and that's what it's doing. It's managing state. I'm gonna just continue to convince myself that that's appropriate here, and all that's working, right? So we've got that set up. We're already at the 30-minute mark. I would like to do my best to make these videos shorter and a little more digestible. So we'll call it at this stage. We've adjusted our task modal to now handle editing a current task. Almost, right? Almost. We're just sending in all the data. The next thing we actually need to do, the next time around we handle this thing, is none of this logic in the useState hook is going to change at all. And we'll prove that to ourselves now before we actually end this, because we've got our create task logic here in the task modal, which again, I left that in there just for the time being. I might just leave it in general, but all this is doing is it's taking our final task data and subtask data from this hook, combining it into a, which I don't think I need to spread these. I could have just left that alone, but whatever. It's making it into a final task and sending that task back to the parent that called this modal, and then it's closing itself. All right, that's kind of it. So if we go into our task view card, which this is the function, right? Close this for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and close this. And if you want to review, any of the information that was in that hook, I believe I had reviewed that one, and we also set this thing up together in the task modal creation video. But we know we're going to receive a new task here, so I should be able to console.log new task, which in this case technically isn't. Well, I guess we'll call it new task, right? We can call it edited task. That's fine, right? If we want to stick with the edited task, if we want to make our terminology a little bit more appropriate here, this is edit task. We get an edited task back. So let's bring out my console here, right? And let's close this. Let's kind of start fresh. Let's look at the console. Bring this up a little bit higher, and let's look at this one that has title, description, subtasks, and is in the current status of to do. If we go click on edit task, if we just say, edited title, and let's completely scrap this description and just do brand new description. And we can add a new subtask. I have something console logging. I guess I have something on the add subtask console logging. I'll go get rid of that in a bit. New task, we can get rid of external testing. And let's leave status for now. And if I do create task, here we go. We've console.logged our edited task. And brand new description. Status is still to do. We've got only the two things we've left here. This didn't change, right? We didn't actually make this change in state, but we can see we've got our updated task correctly, and we didn't really do anything new logic-wise. We just kind of sent the data into our already existing logic that handles managing state of a task. Here's our edited title, so that's working. Let's try this once more. You see my edits went away, right? Like I said, it didn't actually change the state. We didn't actually do anything with that. Let's just change this to doing. Let's do create task. Let's see if that, okay, status says doing there, right? So we know that's going to work for us. Next time around, we'll take this task, which might be super quick. We'll take this task. We'll go send it over to Immer. We'll write an Immer function to edit the task in question. We'll talk about thought process and logic of what we're going to do there. This is what we've got for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed following along with a slightly shorter session. We'll see you next time.